Hello, and welcome back to Coin Lady channel. Judge Torres has yet to issue a ruling in the SEC versus Ripple litigation. The attorney John Deaton has spoken up today. And he said that Judge Torres would be put on the nasty judge list, which, by the way, exists if we don't reach a decision soon. Incorrectly referred to as the naughty judge list, as the name implies, it is not. This is what lawyer Deaton refers to it as. But it is genuine, it truly does exist. And if we don't get it inclusion, this darn case sooner than later, attorney Deaton pointed out that's going to happen, which is remarkable, because Judge Torres has never in her entire career, ever put herself in a position where she would be on that list. But let it be known up front that I come from absolutely no financial background whatsoever. I'm not here to give you money advice. And you know that you shouldn't give any credence to what I say and go out and buy something for yourself, right? Just a hobbyist here that occasionally posts films to YouTube on various crypto-related topics. Oh, and toward the video's closing minutes, I'll write a summary of the piece. From the street, this area is hidden. Former SEC Chair Jay Clayton is quoted as saying, "Yeah, at this point, it probably makes sense to approve a spot Bitcoin ETF, despite the fact that during his tenure, he repeatedly rejected such proposals. For the sake of argument, please accept my explanation." So, let's hear what lawyer Deaton had to say about it. And before I go any further, let me say that I sympathize with the anger people feel. This makes sense to me. I'm not quite prepared to accept the possibility that you're no different from anyone else. Right now, I have zero feelings of frustration. I get that this process is time-consuming. This is a truly historic court case. But if you're feeling hopeless and just want this to be finished, know that you have my sympathies. But if you think something strange is happening, or that somebody is telling Judge Torres to do this and that, you'd be right. We're starting to go a little over the top here, and the Looney Tunes wouldn't approve. I mean, you're getting into some pretty deep conspiracy theory territory there. As I go through this, you'll notice that attorney Deaton highlights previous cases that Judge Torres has ruled on and how long it took. And keep in mind that, if my recollection serves, she currently has over 500 cases that she has damaged, and everyone wants to know what each of these cases is about. What I mean by the not is that, to the best of my knowledge, none of the rest of them are. Not one of them is related to cryptography. But the point is that everyone there will be relieved when the case is resolved, just as we will be when this one is, since it is the most important to us. But here's what Deaton answered when asked why so many people think it's odd that the Ripple decision is taking so long. Before you put on your tinfoil hat and start making assumptions, here are some facts to think about. In December, both the Ripple and the SEC filed their rebuttal briefs. As a result, Judge Torres has taken 7 months to reach a verdict. However, equities are also waiting before pharmacies, so Ripple isn't the only one. December saw the submission of the reply briefs as well. Judge Torres has yet to issue a ruling. Okay. Allow me to inquire as to whether or not you find the SEC versus Ripple case to be comical. Does that mean it doesn't matter if Judge Torres presided over a similar case involving Thor equities at the same time? Does that suggest that there's some conspiracy going on in that case to cheat? As a result, the judge is responsible for 500 separate cases. And she's doing this illegal nonsense and making people roll over in many cases right now? I just can't accept the idea that that's how my brain is wired. My skepticism prevents me from making such sweeping assumptions without solid proof. Sorry, but that's not how I roll. No matter, said attorney Deaton. Judge Torres heard the Carpenters Fund lawsuit in the New York District Court. Over 8 months after the reply briefs were filed, a summary judgment decision was finally issued. It took Judge Torres 7 months to rule in Quiller Incorporated versus USA, and Judge Torres 6 months to rule in the Fitzgerald case and countless others I could mention. To sum up, while I and others had hoped for a judgment sooner, it has taken just as long for other instances and situations. Judge Torres probably knows the gravity of her rulings. It bears stressing that the sheer volume of paperwork associated with this case is unprecedented in comparison to what she normally sees in her line of work. And even just realizing the scope of her choice. Ultimately, in retrospect, I don't believe it's all that shocking that it's taking as long as it is. This shows how seriously she is treating the situation. If I had to guess, I'd say that David Schwartz told Attorney Deaton, "I know waiting is annoying. A ruling on the party's summary judgment motions would be greatly appreciated. However, I wouldn't suspect anything out of the ordinary until the month of September was over." And at the month's end, Attorney Dean had some commentary. I should also mention that he was correct. It's been posted here. I'm going to read you a tweet from September 31st. There is no such thing. He merely made a minor blunder. September 30th is, in fact, the month's final day. I'm going to read it as is though. Now, you also know that Attorney Dean agreed with Schwartz. Judge Torres will be put on the naughty judge list for the first time on September 31st. The 9-month wait for her decision begins then. Although I didn't look through every instance she's had, I couldn't locate any that lasted more than 9 months. The longest was 8 months. There you have it. I'd prefer to skip beyond the second act, and I get that nobody else does, too. There's no reason to laugh at this situation. Nothing out of the ordinary is occurring. So even if you don't understand, the average case would have been resolved by now. We are still not in completely unexplored waters. Simply put, we do not qualify as attorneys, as stated by Attorney Deaton in response to our response in the James K. file. You know he's kidding when he writes something like, "I'm not positive, John, but I think you're the only one who predicted it would be over by now." And he has to mock you in front of everyone. Because he predicted in a tweet last year, I believe it was in November, that we would already have a ruling by then. By the end of March, I believe he stated, and that's certainly on the way back. It's absolutely legitimate for the lawyers in the room to speculate as to when something like this might happen, and I don't mind that at all. And if the date they're expecting it to arrive by in the end, whenever that is, passes and nothing happens, that's great too. Not a big deal, really. The lawyer also recently tweeted that, according to Judge Turisma's data, a judgment is 60% likely to be issued by August 10th. That should be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see this thing wrapped up at least in terms of ruling on the motions for summary judgment by the end of September. If that doesn't happen, it will be the first time Judge Torres goes on the naughty judge list. Then there was this in Bitcoin magazine, for comparison. This afternoon, someone tweeted that they had sent a letter to a judge arguing that an ex-Bitcoin ETF had been approved by the SEC but that a spot Bitcoin ETF had not. And I mentioned it when it occurred. The days run together and I can't pinpoint a certain event because of this. The SEC has been rejecting proposals for Bitcoin exchange-traded funds, ETFs, for well over a decade, making it all the more strange that they would propose something as potentially dangerous as a 2x Bitcoin ETF leveraged here. And they reasoned that market participants ought to have access to that, but an actual spot Bitcoin ETF would be strange. So, lawyer Deaton retweeted and remarked, "I was wondering whether Grayscale was going to do this," referring to the fact that the SEC and Gary Gensler have allowed a Bitcoin futures ETF, a Bitcoin short ETF, and a Bitcoin leveraged ETF, but have denied a Bitcoin spot ETF on the grounds that it is susceptible to manipulation. Simply put, Gensler is a regulator with terrible intentions. Correct as charged, attorney. What do you think of this screen's bad faith regulator? John Clayton, J. This guy is no longer in charge of the SEC, but I recently bought a piece of art from him because he has spent years batting away every Bitcoin ETF that came his way. According to him, the SEC really ought to green-light this. In light of the foregoing, Attorney Deaton has written, "Sorry, but J. Clayton deserves significant blame for the lack of regulatory clarity existing in the United States today." Hard stop, spiraling cynicism. Former head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Bitcoin ETF approval will be hard to refuse if its effectiveness can be demonstrated. If applicants for a spot Bitcoin exchange-traded fund can demonstrate that it is a more efficient and effective way for investors to acquire Bitcoin, then they stand a good chance of having their application approved, according to Jay Clayton, the former chair of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. This is a current-day quote. "It would be difficult to reject authorizing a Bitcoin ETF," he said, "provided they are correct that the spot market is as effective as the futures market." Here it is, take a look. Investment safety concerns and claims of potential for manipulation have never held water. Why the hell do we have to change now? I don't understand what the hell is different from when Jay Clayton was in charge. Nothing about this makes any kind of sense. Clayton, who led the SEC during several rejections of previous Bitcoin spot ETF applications and now works in private practice as a senior policy advisor at the international law firm Sullivan & Cromwell, has made a prediction about when a spot Bitcoin ETF might finally happen, and it's complete nonsense because they've been anti-crypto all along. Let me hazard a guess at this point. Well, properly speaking, once something is filed with the SEC, there is a deadline. And there are things they could do to make it last even longer. It would fall within that range, whatever it may be, but my best guess is that it will be BlackRock. BlackRock is going to be the first to get approved. I could be incorrect, but that's what I've been hearing for well over a year. They have now entered the void, so we shall see what transpires. Okay, we're still at peace. In the past, the SEC has turned down applications due to concerns over how to safeguard investors from the unregulated spot market that were not adequately addressed. Clayton elaborated on the SEC's current line of reasoning by contrasting it with its historical approach to approving futures ETFs. Originally, when the SEC approved a futures-based ETF, they said let's look at the futures market. Quote, Clayton, so he stated in a televised interview, "We don't see them in the spot market, but we do see the surveillance and the protections there that are sufficient for the investor. We'll separate the two groups and say, yeah, they didn't under his rule," to emphasize the point. But he recognizes that, at this point, it will be difficult to refuse. For this reason, I believe that the SEC also recognizes the infraction of undergear against his rule. If the SEC doesn't approve a Bitcoin ETF, as seems likely, then Grayscale will likely take the matter to court. As a refresher, Grayscale has been denied permission to list a Bitcoin ETF before, most recently in the summer of 2018, when the company filed suit against the SEC. But even if they don't approve a BlackRock ETF or anyone else's, I think the court, if it comes to it, will force this to occur since the alternative is so dishonest and illogical. I don't give advice on money matters. Nothing I say should influence any purchases you make for yourself. Please like and subscribe my channel. See you later, bye.